Weeks ago, I posted a video about Disney's embarrassing game showcase, but I want to show more on Disney's failure of gaming. A couple of weeks ago, there were talks that Amazon was buying EA. That was later shot down, but it released a range of suggestions from potential suitors. One that people talked about is Disney. But why? Why should Disney go back to making games in-house and also getting EA after buying and closing their own studios in the past? Disney, the folks behind Star Wars, Mickey Mouse, Disneyland, everything Marvel, ESPN, and hundreds of other iconic characters, believes that the better option is to license its incredibly successful properties out to other companies. Disney is no stranger to video games, as they have been in the industry since 1993 as Walt Disney Computer Software Inc., where it was later renamed Disney Interactive in 1994 and abandoned in 1997. Not for the last time. The division was somehow brought back to service in the 2000s with Buena Vista Games, and with the upcoming CEO at the time, Bob Iger, Disney bought numerous game studios such as Junction Point and Avalanche. In one of the many numerous mistakes from the mouse, Disney Interactive relied heavily on movie tie-in games. Picking up these companies to have them make new projects for Disney was in line with Bob Iger's general approach to entertainment in his tenure leading this corporation, as seen by his purchase of Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. However, the new version of Disney Interactive wasn't quite taking off like they should have. In one of the many numerous mistakes for the mouse, Disney Interactive relied heavily on movie tie-ins for its gaming side to succeed, but with a drought of smash hit films that couldn't evaluate to games during the 2000s, this was heading for disaster, and for them not to pursue original games was another mistake. Perhaps more fatally, attempts to get video game franchises off the ground struggled. Turok was a hit but failed to materialize a sequel. An attempt to relaunch Mickey Mouse as a modernized video game hero in Epic Mickey also failed to grab gamers. It had been well over a decade, but Disney Interactive Studios was still struggling to produce the kind of standalone hits that define a video game company. There was one big swing for Disney's Interactive in the early 2000s that had the potential to change its approach to in-house gaming forever: Disney Infinity. Building off the popularity of Skylanders, Disney Infinity combined action figures with video gaming and allowed players to combine a slew of different Disney characters, from Jack Sparrow to Olaf, in one game. It was an enticing concept, and unlike many other high-profile Disney Interactive projects, this one took off. Nearly 6 months after its launch, it said it has sold over 3 million copies, with the next 2 years delivering new versions of Disney Infinity that added Marvel, superheroes, and various Star Wars characters to the mix. It seems like this franchise could go on forever. However, in 2015, dark clouds were forming over the series that's supposed to function as a savior for Disney Interactive. Production costs and sales of the game and its assorted figures had slowed considerably by this point. Disney Interactive as a whole had a rough quarter in the middle of 2015, which executives at the company attributed to adjustments in what kind of game people played on consoles. Once again, we see how familiar issues come back to harm Disney's video game ambitions. The continued failures of Disney in the world of in-house video game titles was so pronounced that former CEO Bob Iger even openly admitted it in February 2019 that the company was just not especially good in this field. It's not hard to see why. Between an over-reliance on leaning on movie tie-in games, a lack of must-have original game characters, and especially inability to adapt to the changing gaming world, Disney's time in the in-house video game business had more misses than wins, and it was doomed to failure from the start. Tech Insider spoke with several former employees who explained what went wrong with Disney Video Game Initiative. A former Disney Interactive employee, Alex Seropian, was the guy in charge of running Disney's core game group from 2009 until 2012. He was the guy who oversaw various game studios that Disney bought, who worked with external development studios to create games that could be made in-house. With his experience in gaming as also the co-founder of Bungie Studios, the development studio that created blockbusters like Halo and Destiny, Seropian understands how to create major new video games within a large corporation, but his knowledge and experience only got him so far at Disney. Seropian acknowledges any big company has a finance department, will have financial folks embedded in the product units, or business units will take the finances of the business very seriously. He also noticed that Microsoft is a little more focused on the product, at least from a business decision making aspect, with a little bit more of if we make the right thing, the profits will come. Not at Disney. Knowing how to make great hits on film and TV, Disney knew how to predict the payoff of investment in those mediums. It couldn't do the same for video games, and that inability to predict success led to major problems in the game development. It forced Disney to make decisions with a little bit more of an eye towards the spreadsheet than towards the product, opposite to what Microsoft is doing. Another former employee, Tom Eastman, who worked at one of the Disney studios, echoed this sentiment. We are unable to start and continue working on projects. Wideload was basically managing upwards for entire duration after the acquisition. Eastman describes a situation where the small studio he worked for went from being an innovation-focused development house to a family-friendly game maker to a free-to-play game maker to a mobile game maker in a course of 4 years, never fully digging into any one thing. Project after project was pitched, prototyped, and killed. When one project was finally approved and funded by Disney, it seemed too quickly devolved into a bureaucratic mess, because it involved both Disney's oversight and Marvel's oversight. Since we were making a Marvel game, we had red tape from Disney in Glendale, California, and red tape from Marvel in New York. That was especially bad with a mobile game. When you're making mobile games, it's supposed to be small and fast. Disney knows how to make movies, TVs, and theme parks. The company also knows how to run media businesses from ESPN to ABC to Pixar. But when it comes to video games, Tech Insider was repeatedly told by these employees that the lack of institutional knowledge kept the company from ever really investing. There wasn't really much, if any, institutional knowledge regarding video games there, Seropian said. Originally, Disney video games were little more than a license fare. A new Pirates of the Caribbean movie was coming out, for instance, so Disney contacted a game development studio and a game publisher to create and release a game version of the said film. These license efforts were successful enough for Disney to attempt a big investment. That's the origin of the video game arm of Disney that just folded. Investments in big new game series like 2008's Split Second and 2010's Epic Mickey didn't pay off. It was only Disney's Infinity, coupled with the closure of several of the studios Disney previously purchased, that helped the company finally turn the corner. But a projected decline in sales across the next several years meant that Disney wanted out before the sales turned sour. A full statement regarding to the death of Disney Infinity by Disney's head of consumer products, Jimmy Pitaro. After a thorough evaluation, we have modified our approach to console gaming and will transition exclusively to a licensing model. This shift in strategy means that we will cease production of Disney Infinity, where the lack of growth in the Toys to Life market coupled with high development costs has created a challenging business model. This means that we will be shutting down Avalanche, our internal studios that developed the game. This was a difficult decision that we did not take lightly, given that the quality of Disney Infinity and many passionate fans. That's a far cry from 2 years ago when Pitaro said we'll be $1 billion franchise, in reference to Disney Infinity. Eastman states Disney as a company is super awesome, but as creative overlords, not so great. That first sentence is so relevant to what Disney does today with countless remakes and sequels. Liking the people you work with, unfortunately, does not grant them innate understanding of the video game business. The game business is hard, especially on the console side. You have to take a lot of risk, it's a long time to get a return, and you may never get a return. He's not wrong, as Disney fails to understand. To become a game publisher in the modern era, to compete with Activision and Nintendo and EAs of the world on the same scales as they operate, requires both a tremendous financial investment and a tremendous time investment. You will need almost certainly fail along the way, and you have to take those failures and keep going. It's about making careful bets and digging on those bets. Seropian continues, you have to have enough scale to do 4 or 5 of these bets in order to make one of them pop and have a profit at the end. If you're a company that's well capitalized and has a 5 or 10 view, great, you can do that. Disney considered itself in that category in 2009 when I got there, but not too long after that they changed their minds. It took another 7 years before Disney fully gave up, but the writing was on the wall for years. Disney routinely cancelled interesting projects, intermittently closed entire studios it had acquired not long before, and failed to market projects that did end up surviving the development process. The final factor in this article is priorities. Disney is a huge international company with a ridiculous amount of money. It owns the most important, beloved characters and properties in the world. That's another challenge of being a company like Disney. You have got $10 billion to invest in stuff. And your choices are, well, I could make 7 Star Wars movies and 7 Marvel films and a couple of Pixar movies and Star Wars Land at Disney World. Where do I fit the $520 million or $50 million in video games? This article was published in 2016. But as we move to another Tech Insider article from 2020 that states Disney is having great success to licensing as opposed to making games in-house. The dot point states that Disney has a long history of trying and failing to succeed in the video game business, but the past few years have produced a few notable exceptions in 2018, Marvel Spider-Man, and 2019, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Both games were a rare smash hit for Disney characters. Those successes were no accident. They are part of a years-long plan at Disney to put the company's most valuable properties into the hands of major game studios it doesn't own. We want to tap into power of creatives across the industry. Senior Vice President of Games and Interactive Experiences at Disney, Sean Shoptol, said during the talk this week in Las Vegas. This article alone says Disney is having great success in licensing their own properties to third-party developers where Disney can work with and let them create games at their own expense. This gives Disney less risk if the game flops and focus on other things. In reference to this comment saying Disney likes owning and doing things in-house is utter bullshit, as their history of buying studios like Avalanche and doing things in-house was a disaster in gaming. And not even getting the most experienced people on board like Alex Seropian could help Disney. This wasn't a one-off event as Disney has entered and exited gaming back in 1997. It seems they haven't learned anything. There was a possibility of Disney owning game studios once more as Fox gaming division, Fox Next, was bought by the mouse. Iger decided to sell Fox Next in 2020, but knowing he was the next CEO of Disney, Chapek did nothing to stop the sale. But should Chapek go making games in-house again and aim at owning corporations like EA? It's possible, but it will be costly and would increase their debt. Seeing the success of their licensing model and their history of trying to enter the gaming industry numerous times, I bet they will stay with the licensing model in the very long term. I mean, look at their current list of games coming soon, which I added extras on this list. With all these games coming out, there's sure to be hits that could sway Disney's interest in gaming again, right? But there are reports of 2 games based on the massive IP of Marvel that have missed the mark. Games like Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers have lost $200 million for Square Enix, eventually claiming them as the reason to selling the game studios to Embracer, showing the risk is still there even based on massive IP like Marvel. That should worry the mouse, although it didn't cost them anything. In fact, they made money from licensing royalties. In fact, there are more games coming out now than when Disney had its in-house studios. Another thing is Disney should be more focused on their streaming ambitions. Despite having overtaken Netflix with a combination of Disney+, ESPN, and Hulu, their streaming division still reports a loss of over $1 billion at their last report. In the end, Disney is a big, greedy corporation who likes to feed people with dreams and nostalgia, even with idiots thinking Disney should buy this and that and wanting them to dominate the world. But even then, with them buying their way into the game industry with studio acquisitions and trying numerous times, has shown a weakness in one field, And honestly, thank fuck for that.